Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of 10,000 Stitches podcast, a weekly chit chat all about the joys of sock knitting. My name is Andy, and if you are coming back from a previous episode, thanks for returning. And if this is your first time here, it's a great time to start. Welcome to our chit chat about socks. Let's see, if you want to find me somewhere, find this podcast somewhere, that will depend, of course, on where you're watching. There's the YouTube channel, 10,000 Stitches Podcast YouTube channel. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, or Ravelry as Purlbug, Purlbug. I'm mostly active on Instagram, followed by Ravelry, followed by Twitter. You can find my blog at thepurlbug.com. And you can find us on Ravelry as 10,000 Stitches Podcast Group. If you are looking to reach me for some reason, you can basically send me a direct message through any of those things that I just mentioned. So you can send me one through Instagram, Twitter, Ravelry. You can send me, or you can leave a comment on this video on YouTube. You can leave a comment on the post on my blog. You can leave a comment on the thread on Ravelry. If you want to reach me in a slightly more private way, but you aren't necessarily on Ravelry or something, there's a contact page on my blog, and you can fill out the little form on there. It's just like your name and your email address and then your message. And you can send that to me, and that sends it directly to my email. So you can do that. Otherwise, my P.O. box is also listed on my blog, so you can send me a postcard or snail mail, and I will respond to that too. So I think that's all of that intro kind of stuff. I am recording on Sunday, January 31st, and this episode will be posted on Wednesday, February 3rd. So it's crazy that we are already into February, more than halfway through this first kind of chunk of knitting techniques that I'm focusing on for the year. I think I'm working on pair number 6 for the year, so it's just crazy how fast January has flown by. I'm a month into my job. Oh my goodness, but we'll talk about that stuff later. The format for today is going to be the same as it usually is. We'll talk about finished objects, work in progress, a couple patterns that are coming up. We'll talk about the knit along, talk about question of the week / something I kind of wanted to talk about / a topic that was asked for me to talk about in the group. And then we'll do chit chat stuff at the end, so that if you don't care about that, you don't have to listen to it. So, finished object. These are my finished objects. So these are my basket weave rib socks. This pattern is by Sarah Ronchetti, and that's what it looks like. This was knit on a size 0, which is a 2mm needle, US size 0. 68 stitches with Cascade Heritage sock yarn in the colorway, I don't know what the number is. It's like the lilac colorway. So that's what that looks like. Basically, I think when I showed these last week, I was through the heel on one of them, or I had just started the heel flap on one of them, I think. But this is kind of what the pattern looks like, the ribbed pattern. I like it. The way I did it was I did about 10 rounds of 2x2 rib, and then I knit the back of the sock plain, just because, I don't know, I'm finding that I really like that. I mean, one, it makes it go faster, so personally I like it because it makes it faster to finish the sock, but also I think it just kind of gives a sense of continuity to the sock. The bottom of the sock is plain, so it just kind of flows that the back would be plain, and it's not that often that you look at the back of a sock. So I kind of like that. I prefer that. So I only did the pattern on the front, which basically meant 3 of these kind of repeats of the ribbing. And then I did with the heel flap and gusset, and I kind of explained my troubles getting the heel to work on last week's episode. But basically, when I had first done it, I made it all the way through the heel, did a fish lips kiss heel, tried it on, didn't fit. So I wound up doing a heel flap and gusset because this is knit on such small needles, and I feel like this is a very fine fingering weight yarn. I had to knit it on those finer needles, I felt like. And doing the fish lips kiss heel, there just wasn't enough fabric basically to fit properly. So I did the heel flap and gusset. I did the heel flap in a half linen stitch, which turned out okay. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of meh about it. I don't love it, but I didn't hate it either. But yeah, so these made for me, but I don't know, they don't fit great. They're a little bit tight, a little bit small. And I will talk more about this later, but I actually discovered that for this yarn and this needle size, I probably should have done a 72 stitch sock versus a 68 stitch sock, but they'll stretch out a little bit and that's fine. So I'll wear them. These are such that like I don't think I could necessarily gift them to anyone else because they really are long enough to fit my foot. So I'll wear them. I just don't think they're gonna be my favorites. I'm also kind of sick of this yarn color. Knitting these was a struggle for me. Like I got through the first one and you know, it's size 0 needles really hurt my hands. Like they are really small. And so they hurt my hands in a way that like no other needles do. And so I was just really sick of this. And, you know, I was whining about it and I said to Wesley, I was like, maybe I should just start the next one and I can work on, you know, the 2 at the same time. And he's like, no, finish them, get them done, then you'll be done with them. And so I am glad that I finished them and I'm done with them, but I kind of don't love this color. I feel like this color would have been better if it was like a slightly tonal color, but it's just so flat. And at one point I had a whole bunch of acrylic yarn that was this color, and maybe that's why I just am like, ugh, about it. But whatever, I'll wear them. I'm actually gonna put them on now because I don't have any other socks on, so I'll put them on now. And I got a great tip. So last week I mentioned that, I forget if it was with the first one or the second one. It was with the first sock. I had, the fish lips kiss heel wasn't the only problem. Let me see if I can maybe get my foot up close enough to the camera to show you that these are a little bit, so you can see they're stretching just a little bit, kind of like around my heel and around my, around here. So, I mean, they're not so tight as to be unwearable, but they definitely are pretty tight. Anyway, I had mentioned that I also had problems with the cast-on edge at the top. These were knit top-down. The cast-on edge being too tight, the first one that I made. And so I wound up ripping it out. That was another reason why I ripped it out and started over. And I cast on with size 1s and then switched to the size 0s. And I got a tip in the thread for that episode from someone, and I wish I had written down who it was, and I don't remember. I'm sorry, but thank you. They said that what they had heard to do to make that cast on a little bit looser, to make a long tail cast on a little bit looser and stretchier, is not so much to bump up a needle size, but to make cast on your stitches farther apart. If that makes sense. So kind of what I was doing when I was casting on was I was kind of putting my finger between the stitch I had just cast on and the stitch that I was casting on to kind of space them out. And I found that that did help. So thank you for that tip. Because I did that on the second sock and it's just as stretchy as if I had used a bigger needle size. So I'm hoping that all made sense as I was rambling through it. But anyway, these socks are done. I'm glad they're done. They were kind of a challenge for me to power through, but I used my flowchart, which I talked about last week, and you can go to the thread from last week or the blog post or whatever, and find my flowchart as to whether or not you should keep going or give up on a project. So I used that, kept going, and I'm glad that I did. Yeah, so, oh, I totally forgot to mention in the beginning, if you're looking for the notes for this episode, that will depend on where you're watching. So if you are watching this on YouTube, there will be a link down in the description box to the blog post that goes with this episode. You can go there and find all of the patterns or podcasts or anything else that I talk about linked down below the video. You can also, on YouTube, find a link to the Ravelry group. You can go there too. On the blog, like I said, everything relevant will be linked down below the video. Same thing on Ravelry, anything relevant will be linked below the video. Okay. I don't know, my head is just kind of not, I'm feeling fine and everything. I just am having a hard time like focusing today, so we'll get through this. But anyway, so finished object, boom. Work in progress is my twisted socks. And this is a pattern that I've been super excited for. And so yeah, I'm really excited to be working on these. And these, I actually just balled up this yarn this morning. This is Cascade Heritage. Oh, I have them. There we go. There's the label. This is the Cascade Heritage sock yarn, which is a 75-25 superwash merino nylon. Something to note. So these are actually my first pair of like merino socks, and it's very interesting how different they feel than like the Patons Croix. And of course, like I've knit other socks out of, superwash merino, but I haven't actually worn any myself. And so it's interesting because they just feel so different than like the very like rustic hardy kind of Patons Croix. Anyway, this one is the colorway 5684. And I forget what it's called, but it's kind of this yellowy, greeny kind of color. And I like this. This is another one that I wish was slightly tonal, because it's a little boring being a flat color, but I do appreciate the consistency of the color. So there is that, and it's a very nice color. And I feel like it has some depth to it, kind of, like this nice dark yellow green. Anyway, so the twisted socks are, they basically are knit they're mostly purl stitches with sort of this like slipped stitch rib pattern to them. And the way the pattern is written, you do this like slip stitch rib on the leg, and then it's a heel flap and gusset construction, and then it kind of comes up and around from the side of the heel flap and wraps around the foot. I'm not doing them like that. I'm doing them a little bit differently. I mean, I am doing this slip stitch rib, so you can kind of, you can see how that looks. And I really like that. Again, I'm only doing that on the front of the sock. I'm doing the back of the sock plain. And then I will do the heel flap and gusset. And I am gonna do the rib kind of wrapping around the foot, but I'm not gonna do it the same way the pattern is written. Because the way the pattern is written is it really kind of makes it so you have a left sock and a right sock. And I don't like that so much. So I'm gonna kind of write it so that it's more free so that you can wear it on either foot, if that makes sense. And hopefully that will make more sense next week when I actually have them to show. I just started this morning, and I am about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm about 38 rows in. So I did a 10 row 2x2 rib on the cuff, then I started the slip stitch rib. And I'm gonna try and get about 60 rows, I think, of this ribbing before I do the heel flap. And these are gonna be for my mother for her birthday present. She likes this kind of shade of green, so I'm gonna make these for her birthday present. Her birthday's in March, so that way they will be done well ahead of time. But yeah, so that's that. And these are being knit on my size 1, which is a 2.25 millimeter Chaogu, and it's a 72 stitch sock. So it doesn't seem like it should be that big, but, or like it should have that many stitches for only being this big, but it is a 72 stitch sock. So yeah, and like I said, we'll talk a little bit about things like that later, gauge and things. So that's what I'm currently working on. I'm super excited about it. Oh, also, I made this little stitch marker yesterday. How cute is this little guy? He's a little owly. Come on, buddy. Anyway, he's this little owl. I suppose I could take it. I don't really want to take it off, though. Maybe if I flip it like that, so he's, I don't know. Anyway, it's this little owl, merp, on a lobster clasp. I'm pretty proud of it. It's not very good. Like, I haven't done any, like, jewelry making before, but, he stays on. So I'm pretty happy about that, and I'm pretty excited, and he's pretty adorable. And I have more of these little owl beads, so I can make more of these. I'm super excited. And I just picked this stuff up from, like, Michael's. We went to Michael's yesterday, and so, yeah, little owly stitch marker. Kind of excited. So yeah, so that's what is currently in progress. As for what's coming up, so I've talked about this, I don't know, the past 2 weeks or so. I originally had a pair of socks in my queue, the Mojo socks, and I'm deciding not to knit them, and instead I'm going to knit the Dracker socks by Sockmatician. Just because, I don't know, so the Mojo socks and then the Sock and Grippa, which are also on my queue, are very similar kind of constructions, and so I wanted something a little bit different. So that's why I'm going to do the Dracker socks. And so those are probably what I'm going to do next week, and I haven't bought the pattern yet. I really should buy the pattern, but I haven't yet. I will, of course, but it is a paid-for pattern, and I think it's like £3.20. I don't exactly know how to do that with pounds. I don't know how to like say that. It's £3.20 or something, £3.50, something like that. So it's not cheap, like, because the pound is worth quite a bit more than the American dollar. So that's, I think, going to be about a $6 pattern. But I mean, that's fine. You know, I'm just not used to paying for patterns in general. I tend to knit free patterns, so I'm like, "Ah, but I want it for free." Anyway, so yeah, but I'm excited. I think those will be like the twisted socks. Those are one that I'm very excited to do because I just think it will be fun to do them. But yeah, so those ones I'm either going to knit out, I'm going to knit them out of one of these. And I think I showed one of these last week and I forget which one it was, but I think I'm going to go with this one. It's a little bit darker, and it's not like I necessarily prefer one over the other, but this one it's kind of a creamy sort of white kind of color, and I just think I want to save this just in case for a different pattern. I feel like this would work really well with like a lace sort of pattern, so I think I'm going to save this, and I think this is what I'm going to use, which is kind of a yellowy bone kind of color. It's the Cascade Heritage, and the colorway is 5611. So I think that's probably what I will use for the Dracker socks. And I'm not sure if I'll make those for myself. I'll probably make those for myself because I'm selfish. Anyway, so that's that. And then after that, the next one coming up is the Socken Grippa, which is kind of a cool like checkerboard kind of a pattern that again utilizes vertical ribbing, and it utilizes like horizontal ribbing with like alternating your knit rows and your purl rows. So I think that'll be really exciting too. That I think I'm going to knit out of the Patons Kroy casual colors, which is sort of browns and blues, just because I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little sick of knitting with solid colors. Like, I like the solid colors and they work really well for a lot of these patterns, but I kind of think this will work. So I think I'm gonna do this. And these ones will probably not be for me. I will probably make these for someone else. I'm just not quite sure who yet. Maybe I'll make these for my mother's man friend, because these seem like good kind of guy colors. Anyway, so that's the next couple, and then it's crazy because after that, the next pair of socks is the Syncopation socks, and then that's it for the ribbed socks. Like, we are then at the end of February. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit sick of ribbed socks, so I'm excited to be moving on to cables in March because, I don't know, ribbed socks are fun, but I don't feel like ribbed sock patterns lend themselves very well to like striping yarns or anything like that. So I'm excited to get back to, you know, variegated yarns, self-striping yarns that I feel can work a little bit better with like cabled patterns and other patterns. So, but yeah, I have no one to blame for this but myself. So there's that. And speaking of like ribbed socks and upcoming things and cabled socks and all of that, let's talk about the knit along. So like I said, it's the end of January now, so we are halfway through this first knit along. And if you're new, I will link to the chatter thread for the knit along so that you can go there and take a look at the rules, because I can't begin to rehash them in a coherent manner. But basically this first 2 months of the year was focusing on ribbed patterns, so pretty much any pattern that comes up with a stitch pattern using alternating knit and purl stitches is fine. So yeah, so that's been that, and that will end at the end of February, and I ordered the prize for it today, or ordered a skein of yarn as part of the prize for it today, so hopefully that will be here by the time I record next week and I can show you guys. And there will be other pieces to it as well, but that was kind of the big one that I needed to get done. So that is done now. I'm super excited. Yes. So yeah, like I said, take a look at that thread if you want to enter the knit along. Basically, it just has to be a ribbed pattern. It has to be an all-over pattern. It has to be an adult sock, and it has to be started and finished within January and February of this year. So no like works in progress, unless you started it after January 1st. But yeah, nothing carrying over from last year or anything like that. And then starting in March, we will move on to cabled patterns. And I'm super excited about those because some of them I feel like are some of the kind of classic patterns that like everyone has done. Like socks on a plane, I have picked out the zigzagular socks, which I feel like a lot of people have done, and I've never done them, so I'm kind of excited to do those. I also have a pattern picked out, snozberry socks, I think, which I saw on Instagram, and I forget who was doing them. It might have been, was it Vicky from Baronville? Maybe she was the one who was making them. Anyway, I saw someone making them on Instagram, and so then those went right in my queue. And it's a pretty complex pattern, but I'm kind of really excited about it because I feel like it could be a very like popcorny kind of pattern where it's like, oh, well, I just want to do one more row and or I just want to do one more repeat or something like that. So hopefully that will go fast. We'll see. I don't know. Cables definitely has like a lot of complex patterns in that kind of time frame. So we'll see how I do with those, whether or not I can actually keep up putting out a pair of socks a week. But we'll see. So yeah, so that's what's coming up. And then so on to kind of our discussion, which will lead into the question of the week. So I was watching the Knitting Expat podcast for this past week. It's so weird because I'm recording this before I post it, so she will probably have another one posted by the time you see this. But anyway, it was the one that she posted on the same day as my last episode, so last Wednesday. And Mina has been doing the January Sockathon where she's been knitting socks like crazy. And she was talking a little bit about kind of how her gauge has changed and how much negative ease she uses. And she was saying that she knits her socks with a lot of negative ease, like a lot of negative ease. And that she does that because she finds that her socks stretch out. And, of course I can't say for her, we obviously have different feet, her and I, but like drawing from my own experience, I haven't had any of my socks stretch out. Like I've had some that I've made too big and they're just too big. But I haven't had any of my socks that started out fitting well and then stopped fitting well. And I'm pretty hard on my socks. Like I wear my socks in boots, I wear them in shoes, I wear them around the apartment. I sometimes wear them 2 days in a row, which I know isn't always good for socks. I'm not very nice to my socks. I machine wash them. I sometimes machine dry them. Sometimes I hand wash them. Sometimes I don't. But just in my experience, even like my oldest socks, they still fit as well as they did when I originally knitted them. Now, whether or not they fit well when I originally knit them, that's a whole different story. But they fit about the same now as they did then. And some of that I think comes from like if you machine dry them, that kind of helps them to like shrink back up a little bit. But anyway, this is what I was wondering. And I only say this, as like a helpful thing, hopefully. But I know that I've heard that you're not supposed to wind hanks into balls too soon before you plan to use them. Because the longer it sits in the ball, the more like tension is put on that yarn because those balls tend to be wound pretty tightly if you're using like a Swift and ball winder. And so you're putting tension on that yarn, which will start to pull the fibers apart. And so if they sit like that for too long, then basically the yarn loses all of its inherent elasticity, and then it just becomes sad and pathetic. So what I was thinking is that if you knit your socks with too much negative ease, then I would feel like you'd be doing the same thing, right? Like you'd pull them on and they'd feel nice and tight, and then they would seem to stretch out the more you wore them. Because, if they're nice and tight, like if they're really tight, then you're putting a lot of tension on that yarn. Like you're putting a lot of strain on the yarn. And so if the yarn is under that much strain for a long period of time, then it's going to start to loosen up. And so you can actually wind up stretching out your sock because you made it smaller so that it wouldn't stretch out. Like it's kind of like a catch-22. Like you make your sock smaller and then it stretches out more. So then you make your socks even smaller and then they stretch out even more because you're not stretching the stitches, you're stretching the fibers themselves. I don't know if that's the case, but to me it makes sense that that's what would happen. Like if you have a natural fiber that can be prone to stretching out, if you make things too small and you put too much strain on that fabric when you wear it, then it will stretch out and it will never bounce back. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on the matter. So then that leads into kind of questions of like how do I do my negative ease for my socks? And basically what I try to do is I try to make sure that the kind of the width of the flat sock, and I don't have any, let's see, what do I have handy? I don't have anything handy. I have nothing handy. Okay. Oh, well, okay, this will work just fine. I was going to go run and grab a pair, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to have to edit this later. Anyway, so basically, if you think about it, like I try to make the width of the sock, and if, like with this sock, the width of the leg is going to be the same as the width of the foot. So I'll show it, with the width of the leg, but pretend this is the foot. I try to make it so that the width, when it's, you know, nice and flat like this, is equal to the width of the widest part of the foot of the recipient, if that makes sense. So these socks are going to be for my mother. So her foot at its widest point has a width of 9¼ centimeters. And so I wanted to make sure that the width of the foot of the flat sock was 9¼ centimeters, give or take a little bit, of course. Like I figure that out and then I round it to the nearest convenient number of stitches when I, you know, figure out my stitches. But for this one, I wanted it to be close. So I made a gauge swatch because, like I said, these socks seem to come out a little bit tight. And so I just wanted to make a gauge swatch so that I didn't get most of the way through and then realize, oh, it's not the right size. So when I did that with the purple yarn that I was using, if I can find that. I have all my stuff spread out around me on the bed. Oh, here we go. So I knit this little swatch with the purple yarn, which is Cascade Heritage, so doesn't matter what color, it's all basically the same. And I knit this on my size 1s, and then I measured my my stitch and my row gauge, even though I don't really care about the row gauge. But my stitch gauge on this was 8 stitches per 2 centimeters, which works out to roughly 10 stitches per inch. So and this is on size 1s, so I am a super tight knitter. I think I've said that before. I'm a really tight knitter, like no joke, 10 stitches per inch on my socks. So then so I figured, okay, 8 stitches per 2 centimeters. So then I did the math and I came out with, to get a sock that was 9¼ centimeters wide, I needed to cast on roughly 37 stitches per side. And I said, well, I'm gonna make it 36 so that it's a 72 stitch sock so that it works out nicely. So that's kind of how I figured this one out. And that usually tends to give a good amount of negative ease without it being too much negative ease. So that leads into my question of the week this week. What stitch gauge do you knit your socks at? Of course, I don't always knit my socks at this gauge. It depends on the yarn and the needles. But for this particular yarn and needles, it's 10 stitches per inch. I would say, normally my comfort zone is somewhere between 8 and 10 stitches per inch, depending on the yarn and the needles. Obviously something a little bit thicker like Patton's Croy, some of the Patton's Croy, will wind up being maybe closer to 8. And something thinner like this Cascade Heritage will probably be closer to 10. But I am a tight knitter and I prefer a fairly dense fabric. So for me, anything less than that is going to just feel too loose. It's more so that I prefer a certain density of yarn, and it just winds up being whatever my stitch gauge is. It is what it is. But yeah, so that's my question of the week. What stitch gauge do you knit your socks at? Is there kind of like a comfort zone that you're happy with and you find yourself always falling into? Do you kind of do it by feel? Do you always religiously follow whatever a pattern says? I find that I will more often adjust a pattern to fit my desired gauge rather than adjust my gauge to fit a pattern. Because I know what I'm looking for in terms of the feel of the fabric, and it's much easier for me to adjust a pattern than to adjust the way that I knit, because I will somehow try and make my knitting match what I want, and then it will just get screwed up. I will just pull harder on the yarn or something like that, and then no one is happy. So, like with this sock, I just adjusted it so that it would fit my desired gauge. Yeah, what do you do? I'm curious. And I guess that's about it for the knitting stuff. So nice, short, under half an hour knitting stuff, if that's all you're here for. And if that is all you're here for, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you again next week. If you want to hang around and hear about my past week at work and all that stuff, let's keep talking. I'm gonna get a drink of water. So I always feel a little bit weird because I know a lot of the other knitting podcasters drink tea. And I don't drink tea. I always see them drinking tea, and I do have one tea that I really like, but overall I don't like tea. I do drink coffee, but while I would gladly drink coffee all day if I could, I can't. I just get too jittery from it. I drink 1 cup in the morning, and that's about as much as I can handle, unless I'm having it in the afternoon as a treat. So for me, it's mostly water all day. But it means that I'm not one of the cool knitting podcasters who drinks tea and can talk about tea. Sad. Anyway, about my week. So I'm trying to think. Last week when I recorded, the snow had stopped for the snowpocalypse because it was last Sunday. So the snow had stopped on Saturday, and then I recorded on Sunday, and then we got school called off on Monday again. So I didn't work again on Monday, although I did go into work because I had a couple things that I had to do that like I could have pushed off, but I didn't want to. I wanted to just go get them done. So I did go into work for like, I don't know, an hour or two on Monday and did a couple of things, and then came home and just kind of hung out, and that was fine. Like Monday, it got warm. Like this past week, it was decently warm every day, like above freezing every day. So most of the snow is gone. Like you can see grass again most places. And basically the only snow that's left is like what was piled up. I'm looking out the window right now. Most of the snow that's left is what was piled up when they plowed it. So it was funny actually. Wesley's car, when they came through with the plows and everything, because we have to park on the street, his car basically got buried up to like the door handles, you know, with snow piled up along the side of it. And I was like, oh, that is going to be such a pain to like dig his car out. And then we never had to, because we actually didn't go anywhere until yesterday. So it had all melted around his car by the time that we had to go anywhere. So that was pretty nice. So yeah, so by now a lot of the snow has melted. So that's been nice. But yeah, so then Tuesday, back to work, and labs started this week. So my job as the lab coordinator is basically, I'm in charge of all the undergraduate like laboratories. So like I set them up, I take them down. I have one that I teach, like a single section that I teach. But basically, I'm also in charge of if anything breaks, I have to fix it. If anything goes wrong, I have to fix that. So Tuesday, you know, we went in and it was still goofy because like we'd had Monday off and then they did a late start on Tuesday, which I think is really dumb. You know, it's like we're not grade schoolers. You can have us start at a normal time, but whatever. So Tuesday the university didn't technically open until 10 o'clock in the morning. So the first lab of the day would have been at 8. And of course that didn't happen because the university was closed. But I sent out an email to all the TAs saying, hey guys, just to make sure you guys and I are on the same page, you know, labs start at 10 o'clock this morning, so make sure you're there to teach. Yeah, one of them didn't show up, so I got a surprise at about 10 o'clock that I had to teach a lab that I wasn't really prepared for. I mean, I taught it and it was fine, and the students seemed fine with it, and they were okay with it. But it was just it was a little bit of a stressful way to start the work week, but yeah. And then and I did get in touch with the TA, and it turned out that I think there was just a breakdown of communication, and it was no big deal. But yeah, other than that, everything seemed to chug along okay. Had a lot of stuff break. We have the classical mechanics labs, which are basically like Newton's laws and like free fall and things like that. And those seem to go pretty well okay. And then we had the electricity and magnetism labs, which like this first week, all the electricity and magnetism labs are pretty much the same. So they use this device that's called an electroscope, and it's basically a very qualitative measure of electric charge and a way to look at electric charge for students. And I suppose I can draw it if anyone cares, but I'm going to show you guys. Basically what it is you have kind of like an enclosure and okay, so I know this is a great drawing. So you have this circle is basically kind of an enclosed thing, and there's like glass panes, so you can see inside, but it's kind of closed off from the outside air. And then up on top here, there's like a little metal ball that's attached to a little metal rod that then goes down inside of this enclosure. And then this little flappy thing is a little thin piece of foil that's attached to the metal rod. And that's why there's like glass and stuff here, is because you don't want to get any air currents, because it is really thin. Like think gold leaf thin. If you've ever handled gold leaf, that's like what it's like. So any air currents will kind of blow it around and can damage it. So that's why we have this closed in with glass. And so what you do is you take like a plastic sort of rod, pretend this is like a plastic rod, and you rub it on a piece of fur, and that gets this, gives it a static charge, and then you bring it near this ball thing, and what happens is the charges in the rod will repel the charges in the ball, and they will go down into this part and then the foil, and they will cause the foil to repel like I drew it. And then you take it away and it goes back, and it's a cool way for them to visualize electric charges. The point being that these foils can easily be damaged. And that's just, I knew this going into it. These foils can easily be damaged, and they are not easy to replace. I mean, it's really just a matter of taking off the remnants of the old one and gluing on a new one. But like I said, they're very thin and very delicate. And they don't like to stick very well to the metal bar. So, it's to the point where, like, if you're breathing and you're trying to do this, like, you can sometimes blow the whole thing off the table. Like, it's super nerve-wracking work. So I had to replace multiple of those throughout the week, and I finally figured out a good way to do it at the very end of the week, of course. But I'll just have to remember that for the next semester that this is taught. So that was one of the things that kept breaking. That it was not a big deal, but it was like, oh, I have to do this again. But then the other thing was our Van de Graaff generator, which I will also draw. And that basically kind of looks like a big mushroom. And it's this big metal globe that is on top of a plastic piece. Okay, so here's another great, it's a great picture. So this part is a big metal globe up here that's opaque. You can't actually see through it. And then it's connected to this plastic tube. Let's see if I can there we go. It's attached to this plastic tube. It sits on top of this plastic tube, which sits on top of a base that has a motor in it. And basically there's this belt inside that's attached down in the base to the motor, and then up in the metal dome up on top, there's this belt that you turn it on and the belt goes around. And the belt down in the bottom here brushes up against a little comb, and that charges up the belt, which then gets transferred up to the top of the dome. So you wind up with this big dome that's charged. And if you've ever seen pictures of it, sometimes you'll see pictures where, like, someone has their hands on the dome and their hair will be standing out on end. And again, this is just kind of a qualitative way to show kids or show the students about electric charge and, like charges repel and opposite charges attract, all of that. And so with this, one of them kept breaking. The belt kept slipping off the motor because the belt had gotten all stretched out. So multiple times I had to deal with that. And eventually I was like, I give up. I have to order a new belt. Luckily we had little tiny ones, so I could switch one of them out with a little tiny one. But it was very frustrating to, like, just having these things continue to break all the time. And it was like, it can't have been that this semester catastrophically failed. Like, it has to have been happening before, too. And nobody thought to fix it before. But anyway, we survived the first week of labs. I think next week will go much smoother, because part of what made this week sort of stressful was, like, meeting all of the TAs and kind of doing that whole process. And, I met, 12 new people this week that I can't keep them straight. I don't know what their names are, but, kind of figuring out, the different TAs and their schedules and everything. But yeah, I think next week will go a lot smoother now that I kind of know what to expect. And the nice thing is, this next week, 3 of the 4 labs are computer-based, so there's nothing for them to break, which is awesome. So that was most of my week, and then I also was teaching a couple of labs for, juniors, junior level physics labs, which was interesting because actually I think of my 20 students in both the sections, only 2 or 3 of them are actually physics majors. The rest are engineering majors, which is always, it's fine. I have nothing against engineers, but it's always a little bit aggravating that the majority of people in physics classes are engineers. And sometimes they have an attitude. I'm not gonna lie, sometimes engineering students have an attitude where they're like, meh, I'm so awesome, eh. It's like, dude, get it together. Because usually the ones who have that attitude are not that awesome. And I'm sure it's like that for any major, but I've especially noticed it in like engineering students where it's like, oh, I just want to smack you. Um, but otherwise that went okay. And so yeah, so I have some grading to do next week for that, but whatever. But yeah, otherwise it was a pretty uneventful week. Other than that, I have to really learn how to like not overwork myself when I'm at work because I feel like I need to be like productive on work things every second of every day when I'm at work, which is just not really possible because I just can't. You know, you just can't. You can't be thinking about work 100% for 8 hours a day. So that's, you know, just an ongoing struggle for me being very like type A and perfectionist is just trying not to do that. But yeah. And then yesterday what did we do yesterday? Wesley had a violin lesson. I think I've mentioned before that he's trying to learn the violin. So he had a violin lesson. And then we went and had pho at a place here in Richmond that was very good. It's not as good as the place where we used to get pho in Minneapolis. Um, but I think, you know, we got a little bit spoiled by that place. And this place is you know, pretty much the second best to that place in Minneapolis. Like it's the second best pho I've ever had. Um, and it's pretty good. So I'm sure we will be back there. But yeah, we did that and then just kind of chilled out for the rest of the day. And that's the plan for the rest of the day today too, is I have some chores I need to finish up, but I want to get some serious knitting done on my sock before the week comes along and I don't have as much time to do it. And I need to get a letter written to my pen pal because I got his letter like 2 weeks ago and I am the worst at replying to pen pals. It does get done eventually, but I think it was so tough because like I got it and I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll have plenty of time to reply and I'm going to get a quick reply written. And then all of a sudden it's 2 weeks later. And like that's how I feel like my life is when I'm working full time is it's like, where does the time go? You know, like the time between weekends just seems to disappear because I have so little time to like do anything other than work stuff. You know, it's like I wake up early in the morning and then I go to work and then I'm at work all day and then I get home and it's like by the time dinner is cooked and done and I've kind of decompressed, then it's like, oh, and now it's bedtime. What? What? So yeah, so that's I need to work on that. I need to figure out how to function on less sleep. I think that's really what I need to figure out. But yeah, I think that's about it. Another question. This isn't you know, a question of the week kind of thing, but a question I have. So I'm looking to get new glasses because these ones are very heavy because my lenses are really thick and pretty heavy and the frames are heavy. So I've been looking at Warby Parker and I would just love to know if anyone out there has gotten glasses from Warby Parker. What are your experiences? Are they as good as something that you'd get from like a physical, you know, like eyeglass kind of place? Like I've been spoiled because when I was living at home, I would go to this like kind of like a boutique eye place. I mean, it's not really boutique-y, but like it was very nice. And so I kind of got spoiled, I think, by them. So I'm just not sure about Warby Parker, and especially because my eyes are really bad, like really, really bad. And so I'd be interested in like how people's experience with how they do with like the higher prescriptions. So, like if you have really bad eyesight and you've gotten glasses from Warby Parker, let me know what you think of them. Would you recommend them or no? Because I will probably need to go with like the highest index lenses that they have. But yeah, I'd be curious as to know anyone's thoughts about that. Or another good, decently inexpensive place to get glasses if you have horrible eyesight that's not like that. But yeah, I think that's all I got for this week, and I think I'm going to go get back to knitting for a little while and then go to the grocery store and then do some other chores, and yeah, that's going to be my day. So thank you so much for listening and joining me again this week, and I hope to see you back here next week. Bye!